Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the 1904 Club, the Hull City podcast from the Hull Daily Mail, coming to you live from David Prutts in a car park outside a well-known coffee shop. Prutts, how are you?
I'm good. I'm enjoying this little bit of sunshine over in Bradford whilst the car's getting seen to. So no, it's nice to come on and have a little chat with you three. It's been eventful, hasn't it, to say the least? Or non-eventful. That's probably why we're going to have a chat.
How are you feeling? I know you've had the yuppie flu for the last few days.
Bit of lurgy, yeah. Bit of lurgy. It was, just the usual rubbish this time of year, which I think comes to getting older. You get 43, knocking on the door 44. You're in sniper's alley, aren't you, as an adult male? So hopefully dodge a few more. But getting slowly better. Thanks.
Speaking of catching things, Burnsy, how are you feeling?
I'm all right. I'm slowly getting there. Slowly, football's warming me up.
For those that are listening,
warm glow.
Yeah, for those that are listening and not watching, that was a firm shake of the head in disagreement with his own comments. Fletch, how are you doing?
Yeah,
I'm all right. I was at Anfield over the weekend rather than at City. Reminding ourselves of what it's like to be in the Premier League. And there was a quote actually that's quite telling for Hull City's situation, actually, from Jurgen Klopp plastered all over the wall, that says you have to change from being a doubter to a believer. Can any of us believe in what's going on at City at the minute? I'm not too sure. So we'll get into it.
Was that not a Justin Bieber song for us? You'd know that.
I thought you were going to say the quote was "You'll never walk alone," which, from the feedback we're getting with regards to the current situation, the performances, I think there's quite a few people that would like to see a certain person walk alone, wouldn't they? So it would be. I thought that's where you were going with that, Fletch, but maybe you're a nicer person than me.
Nah, I'm a bit more gentle, Prutts.
It's debatable. Burnsy, we were both at the MKM Stadium, unfortunately, on Sunday to watch Hull City beaten again. That's now 4 defeats and 3 draws in the last 7 games. Basically, the game was done and dusted after less than 20 minutes, wasn't it, when West Brom scored twice, gifted 2 more goals. And despite the fact that João Pedro did score a really good header before half-time, it's another defeat, isn't it? And it has the feeling of inevitable at some point this is going to change and going to end.
Well, you would think so, but I was thinking that after Oxford. I've been thinking it for a few games. My sort of thought on it is he improving them? And I don't think he's improving them. It's a rank bad division generally. I mean, you may have a different view on that, but I looked at West Brom yesterday, who went into the playoff positions, and they haven't won in 8 games, and they weren't particularly inspiring. They got 2-0 ahead with a bit of fortune on the first goal, but didn't really kick on, and they let City come at them in the second half and didn't do a great deal. But here you are in a bad division, and you're 19th in the table. You're only out the relegation zone on goal difference, and you've had 3 wins from 15 games. And I know he needed time because I was advocating it, but I just don't see him improving them. And any improvement yesterday, in terms of at least making a contest of it, was for me down to the players' guts. It wasn't anything to do with tactics or anything like that. I didn't think there was any tactical changes or tweaks or anything like that. And I'm still firmly of the opinion that he needs to make a change. And with Mark Robbins on the market, I'd be going and getting him personally.
Prutts, the problem City have got, and I think we'd all agree that yesterday they played all right. They did okay, but my worry,
some chances, create some chances.
They did, but my worry is that they're a team that don't score many goals. They concede a lot of goals. They've had 1 clean sheet in 15 games. They don't win games. They lose games. That, on that basis, you aren't going that way. You're going down, aren't you? And that is that for me. They're going to be in a relegation battle because of all those things. And very often, when teams are in relegation battles, and you'll know this, that teams come away going, "Oh yeah, we played well and we hit the post and we conceded a couple of sloppy goals and." But we ultimately things are going against you and you're not winning games. Therefore, that's why you're down at the bottom of the table. That always happens to teams at the bottom.
Of course it does, and it stops being anything to do with luck or anything like that. It's the whole feeling around the place. I gather there was a fair bit of vocal unrest at the final whistle, which is totally understandable. When you look round and see Josh Maja with that much time and space inside your own 6-yard box and still look surprised, you're kind of going, well, that's ridiculous, because keep half an eye on him when he's in your 18-yard box because he's probably going to score. And I think you're absolutely right. The fact that we've got, Cardiff on 15, Luton on 15, Preston on 15, City on 15 points, that is, just goes to show how ultra tough it's going to be. That fanciful ideas of making the top 6 right now are just that fanciful. The project, if you like, that we discussed last week, and it goes back to what I was saying about when a new manager comes in, and that almost kind of feeling of necessity that you've got to state how are you going to do stuff instead of what you're going to do, which is play football in a certain way, create an atmosphere that's going to be of entertainment and hopefully results. And it's together, because you've got to put the owner into this, the manager into this, and the players into this. Seemingly together, they've created neither. They've created somewhere which feels hostile, not to the opposition, and feels and looks incoherent. It's something that, but the point that Burns has made so many times, and that's what I love about his honesty, in the sense of, yes, coaches are very well skilled and highly educated, and they might want to do X, Y, and Z, and do it in a mystical way that might not make sense to us lay people. But you can sit there and watch it and go, not having this at all. I don't get it. Yes, there were chances created on Sunday. On another day, potentially hit the bar. You know what I mean? You get a goal back pretty sharpish. The rhythm of the game changes. But there's been too many games like that, I feel. Away from that 4-game winning streak, where things seem to be going well. It hasn't done that. So there's too many teams in and around that position, and I would say possibly there's teams in and around that position that have a better squad than City do, that you think are going to start pulling in once they go through the gears off the back of the international break. City could be in real trouble. Push towards the part of the division where obviously nobody wants to be. Pompey have found it tough. QPR have looked a pale imitation of the side that Cifuentes had flying at the end of last season. So there's a good 6, 7, 8 teams that are properly stuck down there at this moment in time that I think are going to be in for a long old slog.
And Fletch, that's the worry, isn't it? That when you look at the City squad, they've got a lot of players out, and that is the mitigation. In fairness to Tim, that he hasn't got his full squad now. He's got a lot of players injured. We obviously had the devastating news a couple of weeks ago that Liam Miller had done his ACL against Burnley. He goes into surgery tomorrow, Tuesday morning. Double tragic news that Mohamed Baloumi, probably the best player so far this season, did his ACL at Oxford last week. So now he's also out for the rest of the season. You look at it, there was no Kamara yesterday. Ryan Longman was back. Great to see him back on the pitch. Doken Sinnick was back on the bench. But it's almost like we've regressed and we've gone back 2 years. It feels like, and maybe I'm wrong, but it has that feeling of 2 years ago where things weren't great on the pitch, results weren't great, they weren't winning football matches, management changed, and they brought Liam in. It feels like we've regressed so much that we've gone back 2 years. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, Billy. Agree with you, Baz. I've said over the last couple of weeks, I mean, at the start of the season, it felt like 2017-18 to me. You're bringing in a manager who wants to play full-on heavy metal football, and the numbers aren't there to back up his philosophy and style of play at this moment in time. Comparison to other seasons, they're 8 points worse off than last year. They're actually 7 points worse off than the year they went down under Grant McCann, but credit to Grant in the first half season, they were up around 8th. Miles off it in comparison to the previous promotion seasons, and they haven't scored anywhere near as many goals. The only couple of seasons they're actually doing better at this stage of the season was when they came back into the Championship, and also when Nigel Adkins was in charge in 2018-19. Now, we can talk about injuries, etc. And yes, that has obviously a significant factor. And it's the only thing really that I think is a supporting mechanism for Tim at this time. I just find it baffling that things haven't clicked yet. And I also, the thing with 2018-19 that I referenced there is that for some reason, Nigel Adkins was then able to take his team on a run of 1 defeat in 12, and I think they won 9 in that run. So it is possible, and I want to look at it positive and spin it positively, but I don't know how we come to that situation where things change. I think Tim needs to, and the staff need to recognise, if Kamara's not playing, if Balloumi's not playing, if Miller's not playing, he has to just swallow his pride tactically and change it tactically. Whether you have Bairstow and Pedro up front together and allow 2 wing-backs to get forward and supply the crosses, possibly, as a tactical change. But I don't think he's going to do that. And I think we'd all be in agreement that he's not going to do that. And that's what's going to cost him, I think, in the next couple of weeks.
Burnsy, you've got some fan interaction for us, because it's fair to say that over the last few days, obviously there's been a groundswell of frustration, understandably, given the results, but also just the way fans are just fed up, aren't they? That was the 20th game at home in 2024, and they've won 3 times. I know we keep harping on about it, but it is a relevant point, and it's why fans are just fed up.
Going back to Prutts' point about sort of a bit of hostility yesterday, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. When they went 2-0 down, I thought, I wonder whether this is going to turn. But in fairness to them, I think that the fans stuck with them. They recognised after City sort of coped with it being shell-shocked, I think, at 2-0 down, that they were having a plug at it, they were having a go at it. And so the atmosphere was not as bad as it could have been yesterday. There was a few boos at the end, but I think the fans recognised that the players had a real go at it. They just weren't good enough. Sorry, Baz, go on.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. I was concerned about what the atmosphere would be like yesterday, given what we saw or we heard after Portsmouth, and then particularly in that second half Oxford when it was vitriolic towards the manager, and also quite humorous as well at the same time. But I think, like you say, I think it's a good point that the fans aren't stupid. They can see their team working hard. Xavier Simons hit the crossbar at 1-0. If that goes in, they obviously responded with João Pedro's goal. So that there were a few murmurs at half time, but because they got themselves back in the game, I think the fans could see, well, actually, jeering them off at the break is probably going to be counterintuitive, because they're back in the game. I think if it had stayed at 2-0, perhaps it would have been. But they can see that, this, and Prutts, I think for you as well, we've seen over the years so many teams down tools when it's not going well, and they just almost throw in the towel. And then the fans, that just exacerbates the situation. But this is a Hull City team. They've got a lot of character, a lot of courage. There's a lot of players there that care, and then they aren't the type of group of players that are going to lob in the towel and go, we're going to throw the manager under the bus here. We're going to do that isn't their style. So the fans could recognise that they did work hard yesterday, and they did dominate the ball second half. But at Oxford, they had 2 shots on target for all that dominance in the first half. Yesterday, 13 shots, only 3 of them hit the target. Okay, 1 hit the bar, but so the fans can see they're trying, can't they?
Well, that's a prerequisite. It's a fundamental, but I think that comes off the back of the goodwill that's still there from what Liam instilled in last season. I think obviously there have been comings and goings, but there are people like real totems of the team that have stuck around. That there's a lot to like about. There's a lot to appreciate in the way that they go about it, and they've got to have that, haven't they? They're not a team that's going to go around passing other teams off the pitch. They're not a team that's playing football in the type of way that's, I don't know, it sounds so kind of backwards faced, doesn't it? Like, they're not a team that's going to be playing football in a way that's going to get you off your seat, ironically, which is what the management change was made for, was it? So it's a really intriguing one, because the chances that they created, the opportunities that they had in the game, that had come away with a 2-2. I think, obviously, everyone's happy days against the West Brom side that had been flailing around a little bit, but has been top of the league at one point this season. So it's, I think it's just frustrating, the fact of going back to Burns' point, which is So we covered mainly Cardiff Blackburn on Saturday. And before that game, Blackburn hadn't scored in 7.5 hours. Now, in your head, Blackburn Rovers have had a good season so far. But now they're currently 9th, and they dropped out of the top 6 after what was, like I said, a seemingly good open start to the season. They score 3 goals. They go into the international break relatively happy. It puts them, of course, 7 points ahead of Hull City's 15. Plymouth, we believe them to be no good on the road, but very good at home. They're just 1 point ahead. Coventry have deemed Mark Robbins, who's absolutely moved mountains for them, not good enough. They're 16th on 16 points. They're in 17th, but they've elected to move on. Oxford United, given what they're doing for the first time back at this level for 25 years, have been deemed a success. Wednesday lose the derby yesterday to Sheffield United. Norwich City, toss of a coin type stuff for them. And big clubs stuck in the middle, Stoke and Derby, even though we're talking about Derby side that have just come up. It's a division to me that's not seemingly making too much sense because we don't have those big hitters that we had last year, which were really kind of going through the gears and striding ahead. But for Sheffield United's point deduction, they'd be kind of really blasting the way through, wouldn't they, and showing everybody what they could possibly do. And Sunderland, Leeds, Burnley, again, a couple of dodgy results before the game yesterday, and seemingly back to it. So we're going back to Burns' point of what the standard of the division actually is. That's again potentially that's where the frustration comes in, because I did just say you look at City's squad compared to the teams around them, it isn't possibly man for man as strong, but as a collective, the division's flat enough for a team to move from somewhere on 15 points to be somewhere mid-table, knocking on the door of the top six. Millwall were terrible at the start of the season. They then win 4 games on the bounce, 1-0 against some very, very good opposition. Draw at the weekend, and suddenly everyone's looking at what Neil Harris has done with that side, currently sitting 8th, and saying what a terrific job. They've got good players, Millwall, but standouts compared to City? Possibly not. If you're, again, going back to being a lay person looking at the Championship. None of it's making sense, and I watch it every single week.
It doesn't. It's an awful division. Let me read some of the messages coming into the
We never try and sell it like that, though, Burnsy. Don't worry.
No, I know. Well, it's still competitive, though, Prutts. Nobody knows what's going on, but the standard looks way below what it has been in previous years.
Burnsy, just quickly before you go into comments, and that's the frustrating thing from City's point of view, isn't it? And that's where we are really upset with how things have gone, because you think of those 3 games they drew. They drew against Burnley. They were the better side in the first half. Burnley improved in the second, but they led in that game. That's a game they should have won. They went to Derby, who were god awful, got back in the game from a set play. That's a game that City, with not much more effort and a little bit more quality, would have won. They were 1-0 up against Portsmouth. Were garbage in that first half. Should have been out of sight. City were garbage in the second half, but they led in that game, and that is where this inherent frustration comes from. The Championship this season, they've lost to Sheffield United, who offered absolutely nothing, but didn't need to because they were gifted 2 goals. They lost at Leeds United, who offered very little, but were gifted 2 goals. They've lost again against West Brom, who offered even less than Sheffield United and Leeds put together, and were gifted 2 goals and won the game. And that is where this frustration comes from. Yes, City are a work in progress. Yes, they've had injuries, but they've been in these games, but they haven't had the quality. And I think the tactics are in part a problem, that they've not picked up more points. And that is where this frustration, because the Championship is so bang average.
But the double frustration for me is the owner knew it. The owner said it, and he was right. But he didn't do anything about it. He was too slow in the recruitment, and it comes back to his story. I've got some questions on the owner coming up. Clement Attlee's got in touch from beyond the grave via Doris Stokes. I don't think it's a political point, but JDB, who's at Clement Atlee on Twitter, gets in touch with the 1904 club. The best managers in City's recent history, Taylor, Brown, Bruce, didn't inflict a playing philosophy on the team. They picked the best 11 available and set the team up to play to their strengths. The best managers at this level do this. It's not rocket science. That goes back to my point about philosophy last week. Jason Statham, not that one. We've got all the celebs in today.
God.
Clement Attlee and Jason Statham. Better performance, more positive, but still missing chances. Thought for large parts we were the better team, but at the end of the day, we still lost, which is the only thing that matters. Something has to change, either change the tactics or change the manager. Dave Weldrake says no cutting edge, but at least we saw a little more purpose with the ball. However, it's a shame that it takes going 2-0 down to start to show that purpose and urgency. And here's one I want to get to. Flatcap and Ferret says, if the owner is thinking of selling the club, why would he pay off a manager and recruit a new manager and pay a signing fee? Just a thought. Well, I think, there was a couple of people suggesting to me yesterday that the owner's thinking of selling the club. Is there anything in that? I think he's too silent at the moment, personally, the owner. I think he needs to come out and say, look, this is where I'm at, this is where we're at, because he's never been reticent before, and it's refreshing. But now he's not saying anything, and personally, I feel he needs to. Where's he at? Is there any hint that he's selling the club, Baz?
No, I don't believe so. I know he wants to do something, do an interview during the international break. So I'll wait and see what comes of that. Look. I think we have to admit the optics of it at the minute aren't particularly great. Obviously, he wasn't at the game yesterday. A few days ago, was it after a game? There was a statement out on his social media account relating to Fenerbahce. So I understand from a supporter's point of view, they feel that, and given how things were in the summer, that their football club is being a bit unloved at the minute from the owner because of the Fenerbahce involvement. He says that's not the case. He says, obviously he's funding the club. He's working day to day on the football club, although he's in the background a bit more. Some would argue that's a good thing, because obviously we went through a period where he was saying he was in the media every other day saying something, and obviously we have the Q&As, and people were saying that's too much. I don't want to hear from him again. So it's trying to find that happy balance, isn't it, of being able to communicate at the right times. And I think I'll come to you in a second, Flash. I think that is generally what Adjun, throughout his tenure, which is almost the 3-year anniversary, he's been able to do. Is he's been able to communicate with the supporters at the right intervals. When he's needed to talk, he's been able to say the right things. I think we're getting to that stage now where he does need to communicate his feelings on we've had 15 games. We've got two of our best players out for however long with serious knee injuries. They're not winning games. The manager's under pressure. And in fairness to Tim, he's the fall guy at the minute. He's the one that, Tam's gone. Tam was always good for an interview. Tam would always come out and say something, whether it be to me or to BBC. So he's gone. So unfortunately for Tim, he is now the focal point. He is the one that's doing all the interviews. Filip Taplovic should have done. It was scheduled for Filip Taplovic to do the pre-Oxford press conference last Monday, but because of how the game played out against Portsmouth, it went back to being Tim. So he's having to he's having to answer all the questions, and there is nobody else to take that pressure off him. So and obviously because we're playing a lot of games, it was Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday, and he's doing a lot of media, and so he's getting, and he doesn't enjoy doing, and that's before anybody jumps on me. That isn't a criticism.
Tiny violins here. That's part of his job.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, you're picking the team. You're not winning. You need to. You're not front up. And fairness to him, he is fronting up. I just think the owner needs to front up.
And I think that is absolutely. I know Prutts went in on this the other week about the media commitments, and Tim has to deal with it. He's a big man. He gets paid a lot of money. That is part of it. But he is the only, at the minute, there is nobody else from the hierarchy at the football club putting their head above the parapet to come and talk to the supporters, and that is something that does need to happen. Going back to your original point, I do believe when I spoke to Adjun last week, he wanted to do an interview during the international break. So we'll have to wait and see if that actually does transpire. Hopefully it does. Go on, Prutts.
The thing is as well with this, and having played and obviously doing what I do now, I would say, by and large, given what Ajan's done, he's as good a football owner in English football in the Championship as you could possibly wish for, because I understand what you're saying, Burnsy. When it's when you need your generals to step forward when things aren't going well. That's when you take a few more of the kind of brickbats, don't you? But I given what I've seen from it, I talked about Cardiff and Cardiff playing Blackburn, and you've got Omer Reza that's done a terrific job in interim charge, but he's hearing nothing from upstairs. Different situation, obviously, at Cardiff City, but the owner's there. He might not have been there at the weekend. He's putting his money in. That money is seemingly valid money. That money is seemingly money that's not just going to vanish. The tap's not going to turn off. Hopefully, I'm not tempting fate with any of this. So those PR exercises that we've spoken about, we're a little bit tongue in cheek. We understand it's great to invite a load of fans over to Turkey, and it absolutely gets everyone on board. I totally get that. But then you do want them front and centre when things aren't going so well. But hopefully, with his recruitment, he's brought a manager in that can deal with that. As we said last week, has to deal with that because that's part of his remit. And given this is the irony of having a successful businessman in charge of the football club. The football club is the one entity that everyone's engaged in and looking at, and the fans, it's that number one thing. Because he's a successful businessman, it's one of many things for him. It would be naive to think that it's totally there all the time, because he's got to keep other plates spinning. That's why he's successful. I do think maybe that doesn't help if you're a City fan going, well, I don't care. He's bought the club, he owns the club, he's run the club. That's part and part. Like we said about Tim getting his head around doing all of his media stuff, the fact that he's got to be on call, as when it comes to things hitting the fan, that's another thing as fans you would expect. But I think what I've seen of him, what you've all spoken to me about, and what I've seen in and around the city, I think by and large he's been a fantastic owner. Yes, we've questioned decisions that he's made, i.e. the Liam one, but he's come out and told you why. There'd be many an owner that would kind of just say, "What's it to you? This is what I've done. See you later, and I'll do what I want." And maybe Burnsy, maybe that's him in a position where he's kind of going, well, as we said, Tim Bolter's come in, Tan's moved on. Maybe Tan would have been there to kind of been a bit of a buffer between what's coming out and the questions being asked of within. But it's where the manager earns his salt now at the moment, because he's obviously got to put a team out on the pitch. The team's not getting the results. Ultimately, he takes responsibility for that, and ultimately, he possibly has to be there front and centre to explain why. I've been intrigued to see what Ajan says in the next kind of whenever you get to him, Baz, in the next week or so, because he'll be. I get the sense that he'll be as frustrated as anyone else with the way that results are going. Because Christ Almighty, again, what's the figure that he puts in a week to the football club?
Well, it's astronomical, isn't it? That's it's 20 odd million a year, isn't it?
Staggering.
Just on that point, before we go to Fletch, George Bell says, can Ajan afford to sack Walter and his team? Last set of accounts suggests we've gone from almost zero debt to £45 million in debt, which will have grown more since. Very worrying, the mess we're now in. Do you recognise those figures? Has anybody had a look at the accounts recently?
I don't recognise them off the top of my
George.
head. I'm not doubting George. I think George, normally, knowing George, he's quite level-headed, and I think he's quite thorough. The point I was going to make on Ajan in particular is, and it's the only time really that in the last few weeks especially I've shown any sympathy for Tim Bolter, is if the hierarchy are going to back him, surely you would want that extra level of security and solidarity of him actually being there on the weekend. I think that was possibly a slightly poor move from Ajan, and he'll have his reasons. But I think when you hear Tim speaking as well in the media, he's obviously frustrated, etc. But to me, he comes across as someone who sounds very, very beaten up at the moment for me. And I think I can hear it in his voice, and I can hear that he does actually care, and that he does. I'm never saying that he didn't care, for the record. But it's coming across as he sounds like a worried individual who I think is now really starting to worry about his position at the football club. And even though, by the sounds of it, he has got the backing of the hierarchy, if I was Tim Volter, I would probably want the person who's paying my check to be there to see what's going on, so that they can actually, come and have a phone call after the game or during the week and whatnot, or speak in person. Because I think if you're Tim Volter now, I'd be feeling pretty lonely at the moment, because it feels like the world is against him.
I think they are having conversations.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to be there to watch the game, do you? It's and I take Prutts' point about him being a busy man and everything. I'm just looking at it as, because his PR has been very good. It's just he just needs to come out and calm the waters a little bit or whatever. But the manager's under real pressure. But I do think conversations are going on.
But just to add, sorry, Baz, can I just really quickly add? I think,
go ahead.
Given that Adrian is there nearly every week at home, I just found it a slightly peculiar situation for him to suddenly not be here in the situation that's arising at the moment, in that you've got a manager who's in a very precarious position. And I think if Adrian had the opportunity to be at the game, then I would have taken it.
Yeah, so Fletch, it's a great point, because it's sometimes things like this, when you're on the outside looking in, like we are, you really do scratch your head about why things wouldn't happen. And given the feeling around the stadium and the ground and the position that City find themselves in, that united front that I think you're talking about, owner looking down on manager he's employed to do the job of leading City to wherever he believes it should be. There must be something in it, because it just seems so straightforward a thing to do, doesn't it? You're absolutely right. It's almost, he's my man. I'm backing my man, quite literally and figuratively, from up here in the stadium. And and the other side of that is as well, if there is a collective, downbeat end to a game where there maybe is a bit of booing, then owner and manager and players all get it at the same time. So I mean, you're there clapping when things are great, when games are being won, and you're there kind of bowing your heads and apologising when things are crap, which is how they are at the moment. So yeah, I'm quite surprised, considering, going back to Burnsy's point, how the key PR notes that he's played so far have been pretty on the money, Adrians, haven't they?
Yeah. And I think it would be in everybody's interest to for him to come and say something. Equally, I do know that him and Tim speak on a daily basis, and I was talking to Tim about this actually at the training ground the other day, and how he's really pleased that he's got a direct line to the owner. He doesn't have to go through 3, 4, 5 different other people, and by the time his message or whatever gets to the owner, it's been watered down, it's been changed, it's been whatever else. He has a direct line into Adrian, and I think he likes that. So whilst the outward perception is that Adrian isn't there, they are talking on a regular basis. The staff at the club are dealing with Adrian on a daily basis. He's very heavily involved. It's not like people. I know a lot of people are thinking, well, because he's not saying stuff on social media and he wasn't at the game on Sunday, that he doesn't care. He's not around. He's very much around. I think he's just And equally, look, let's call a spade a spade. Adrian can come out and say what he wants, but ultimately, what he says in the media isn't going to impact on the pitch. And ultimately, they've got to start winning football matches. So Adrian can come out and go, yeah, I love Tim Walter, or no, I'm going to sack him and get somebody else, or we need to do this, or we're going to do this in January, blah, blah, great. All wonderful, great to hear from you. But ultimately, they've got to start winning games on the pitch. And so what the owner says is kind of not irrelevant, because of course it's not, but it's not going to change. And ultimately, this situation is only going to improve by the team and whoever the manager is, whether it's Tim Walter at Luton or Andy Dawson or Michael Schumacher. I can't not say Stephen Schumacher. Stephen Schumacher, Rob Edwards, Mark Robbins, Neil Warnock, or whoever it wants to be. They've got to start winning football matches. That is ultimately what they've got to do to get out of this mess. And the owner coming out and doing interviews in the press is not going to change that. And that's fundamentally where we're at, isn't it, Burnsy?
I genuinely think he needs to come out and say, look, these are the mitigating circumstances. I need to hold my hands up, and the recruitment wasn't quick enough and good enough, which is why I'm sticking with the manager. I've put him in that situation. We talk. I like his philosophy. The results aren't happening. They're not far away. I've maybe talked to some players, and the players understand what he's trying to do. And this is a tricky time for us. And, you know, we'd all love to get to the playoffs. There's still a chance. I'm going to make some investment in January, however we're going to do it. I just think he needs to put himself up to a bit of scrutiny, personally, you know. And he can calm the waters, he can muddy the waters, but he from my point of view, he needs to say something. The fact that there's a lot of concerns, as I said, you know, supporters saying, well, is he selling it? Is he going to stick with it? You know, George saying the last account showed 45 million quid debt. I've no reason to doubt that whatsoever.
Well, just to add to that, Ben, sorry. I'm just looking at the actual accounts. The operating loss of 2023 was 20.5, according to the balance sheet on the public document for the football club.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's a question of what's gone in the last 12 months.
Yeah, because they were shelling out a huge amount last season. And I seem to remember Tan at one of the live 1904 clubs doing almost saying we had the funding for 2 years to do it. So, you know, we're in that second year or that second season to get them in the Premier League. It's, you know, I wouldn't rule that out completely this season, but it looks hugely unlikely. The more in a relegation.
Another part about this is, I mean, given historically what City have done, so obviously coming out of the Premier League in 2017, finishing that next season the champ 18th, 13th, next season 24th, obviously relegated, coming back up as champions, and then since they've been back, they finished 19th, 15th, and 7th. So I mean, so by virtue of what that reads, and obviously there's been different players and different ownership groups within that, what then becomes realistic? I'm not saying for 1 second that in November you write the season off and kind of just go, well, it would be great if we finish mid-table, if we flirt with the playoffs, great, because that means that you've got a football club that's just literally treading water and is very unambitious. But there's no, just because there was a City side that had potentially quite a long purple patch of the season last season that finished 7th, does not mean to say they are absolutely, there's a divine right there to finish in the top 6. Maybe given the squad and the management that they've got, maybe it is a mid-season, a mid-table season, which, like I said, sounds terrible and very, very crap in November. But it's not been a team that's come down from the Prem and been absolutely knocking it out of the park, trying to get straight back there by any means, has it?
They look like a relegation side. Rob C says
it's not a better squad than last season, and it's not a better manager than it was last season.
No. As I said before, Burnsy and Prutts, you know, when you look at the body of work, yes, we're only 15 games in, but when you look at the body of the work, they're struggling to score goals. They've had 1 clean sheet all season, so they're having to score 2 goals a game, which they can't do. They've only done that in those 3 wins. Everything is pointing to where they're going in the table, and that is down. And that's not being negative or having an agenda against anybody. That is just speaking the facts as they are in front of us. They've played 15 games. They've kept 1 clean sheet. I asked Tim Walter this the other day. I said, how are you going about getting clean sheets? Because that would give you a solid basis to get something from a game. And he just laughed and he said, if the other team score 2, we'll score 3. And if they score 4, we'll score, well, if they score 3, we'll score 4. And I was like, but you're not doing that. Your team isn't scoring that many goals a game. You're not having that many That
was his answer.
Yeah. I've got it on record.
They're not Newcastle United in the mid-90s, are they? They're not like the entertainers, bless them. And I said, I don't mean that condescendingly. It sounds really condescending. City have not got the firepower to do that. If that's their approach, then that's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
And that is my concern. They haven't got the players.
Jesus.
I mean, that genuinely is what he said. And at some point over this next few days, I'll get to writing that up and I'll put it out as a story. But on how he's trying to get the team to keep clean sheets. But when you look at it, when you look at the stats, they're not having that many shots on target in a game. I think it was 3 at Oxford or 2 at Oxford and 3 yesterday. That's not you're not blowing teams away with 2 shots on target in a game against an Oxford team who they should have, in fairness, were really good in that first half. They should have won the game, but they didn't because they can't score, and that is a problem we've seen all season. As good as João Pedro's goal was yesterday, Simons hit the crossbar and Regan pumped one over from close range. But you're going back. I'm driving home thinking, what other chance? Because he's talking about, when I was talking to him after the game last night, he was talking about the chances they had, and because I said to him, but you're not creating a huge amount, are you? You're not creating genuine.
Regan's was the only one where that is a poor header in a very, very good area. That ball whipped in where it's kind of just gone completely off the way, and I get it, it happens. But like you say, the Pedro header, it's a cracking header. It's a very, very tough header. The striking of the bar, that's a low margin effort on goal. Like you say, they're not like banging at the door every single game, are they? The only chance that I saw within all the chances that I did actually see was which way you go, and you're saying that should have at least hit the target, if not hit the back of the net, was the header from Regan. So that's an astounding take on what he's seeing. If we'll just outscore the opposition. Wowzers.
Fletch, unless I'm wrong, the only time they've scored more than 1 goal in a game this season is those 3 wins.
Yeah.
So out of 15 games, the other 12 they've only scored the maximum they've scored is 1 goal. So, and they're conceding in every. They've had 1 clean sheet, and that was the 3rd game of the season against Millwall. 3rd game, is that right? Yeah, Bristol City, Plymouth, Millwall, 3rd league game. Obviously, Sheff Wednesday's reserves was also a game where they lost and they didn't keep a clean sheet. But I don't know. I look at it and I look at what's in front of me, the body of work that we've got to base our opinions on so far, and it's going one way. And I'm driving home last night thinking, have I got it wrong? Did I watch a different game? Am I thinking that have I missed a load of chances that they had? Simons hit the crossbar, yes, and Regan's header, who I thought Regan played well yesterday, and that is, 9 times out of 10, and probably 9.5 times out of 10 on the training pitch, he scores that, and he unfortunately it happens. Players miss chances. It does happen, but that needed to go in. But the clean sheet thing, the lack of desire from the manager to change that and make them tougher to beat just blows my mind, and that is why I genuinely worry about them, because if he doesn't see the merit in keeping them tight and keeping them, really tight at the back, well, they're not going to win many games going forward, are they? Because they're going to be conceding the goal a game, and they're going to have to score at least 2 to win it, and they don't do that. So unless I'm getting this wrapped around my head, that is where I'm at. Burnsy?
No, Fletch, go on.
Well, I was just a statistical point. I always try and offer one, and we all know that from this tactical philosophy that crossing is a key ingredient to City's success on the pitch if they can do it. Louis Coyle's in the top 5 for accurate crosses and percentage of times he's hit the ball into the penalty area and actually found something. But then after that, Regan Slater in the entire championship is 96th for players that have actually attempted a cross and found someone in their own kit colours. So it's a point that I think you can possibly support Tim Volter in that he's got a philosophy. The players aren't delivering that part of the bargain in terms of goals. But then do you change it? When do you recognise that it doesn't work in that manner and change it?
Just on the subject of crosses, people were commenting on there was a lot of crosses going in yesterday. Longman putting crosses in.
They put a great ball right in, to be fair.
What I couldn't understand was I know Pedro had scored a goal, but he was blowing out his backside by the hour. For me, his legs had gone. Why did he wait till about 5 minutes from the end to stick on Badia, who, big lad, awkward, might have a possibility of getting on the end of a cross? Yet, and I could be wrong here, but he hadn't even warmed up. He was just sat in the corner of the bench, and then it was like a whim from Tim Walton and thought, right, I'll throw him on. Go on, get ready. He hadn't warmed up and he stuck him on. And I'm thinking, why is he not on before? I know he's not necessarily the best, but personally, I think there's something there. He's big, he's awkward. He might get on the end of stuff and cause a bit of chaos. And I just looked at that and thought, well, what's that about? Why is he not prepared? Why haven't you made that change earlier? And, I feel like I'm hammering the manager, but, he's there to win games. He's there to entertain. That was the philosophy. And I come back to it. They're not improving. And you look at decisions like that and think, well, where's the in-game decision making? Why are you doing that? It was just a last desperate throw. And he should have made it a little earlier, in my opinion. I'll read a couple of messages. Go on, then, Baz. You were going to say.
Just while you're getting ready, they're losing 2-1 at home again, and they had all the ball second half. West Brom just basically when Corberan went, okay, we're going to be made a couple of changes just early in the second half. We're just going to sit in and try and play on the counter, maybe play for a set play, but we think we're happy with what we've got. They're losing 2-1 at home, going into the final 10, 15 minutes, and he didn't, like you say, Bedia, he took him on. He waited until the 90th minute. When the board went up with 5 minutes added on, he waited until the 90th minute to chuck on another striker. You're losing the game. I don't understand why that change didn't come after 75 minutes when you're still losing the game. And his response when he was asked about his changes was, I thought we were playing well. I thought we were in the groove, we had the momentum, everything was going well, players were playing well. I didn't necessarily want to change it. Well, but you weren't creating bucket loads of chances. You weren't peppering the goal with shots. You didn't really look like scoring. You were playing. They play with so much. What baffles me is they play with so much jeopardy from the goalkeeper, but then they get into the final third, and it's very predictable and it's very easy to play against. It's so easy to defend against. That's what I can't compute in my Prutts. Maybe you can answer this. I can't compute in my tiny little brain why they play out from the goalkeeper and they play at so much risk, and they almost give the ball away at time after time after time from the goalkeeper, going sideways and back. But yet, when they get into the final third, it's like, well, what are we doing now? And this is supposedly an attack-minded manager that can blow teams off the park with his attacking football.
Yeah, but can he?
Well, that's what we were told.
Well, yeah, that's what we were told. But you and this is sometimes when this is what happens when obviously everyone passes judgment on what managers possibly could bring to a football club, and when they come from different parts of world football, you've got to do a bit more digging. I didn't know too much at all about this manager before he came, and that's not to say that because I didn't know too much about him, that doesn't mean to say that his CV isn't good. Not that at all. But coming with that kind of cachet of apparently attack-minded football, then you sit there and kind of and you look forward to it, don't you? So, well, this could be quite exciting, but because it's not been that, and with the jeopardy totally reversed in the sense of, as you say, putting the ball at risk near your own goal and not necessarily taking too many risks attacking the opposition goal, it doesn't make any sense. That sense of changing a team or changing the formation or chucking a player on when you are kind of knocking on the door 70, 75 minutes, you might as well get done 3 as get done 2, because if you're already losing the game, so chuck more on and just throw more jeopardy going forward. If you are going to whip in balls in from the edge, from the wider parts of the pitch, get your more forward-thinking players and just stick them in the middle of the box. I know that sounds quite straightforward, but that's kind of what you do when you're chasing the game. You throw the kitchen sink at it. The philosophy of the man and the manager does not fit what people are seeing with their own eyes on the football pitch. Now, whether he's found himself in a position, potentially for the first time in his career, where the playing staff doesn't match his philosophy, and now he's got to tweak the philosophy. That might be where we're at. He might have been in a position before where he's gone, well, this is how I play, and these are the players that I want, and it might have come to fruition. Whereas with spending and budgets and turnover and wages being what they are in the Championship, and for a club like City in the Championship, maybe he's had to realise that, well, this is what you've got to work with. There's been help to a certain degree with the recruitment, but fundamentally, he's got what he's got, hasn't he? And if the players can't do what he wants to do formational-wise, then you've got to work through each permutation of that starting 11 to work out whether that's one 11 that can't do it, but this 11 can, or whether you go through the whole squad and go, actually, well, no combination of these players can do what I want, therefore I'm going to have to change, which maybe we'll see 2 weeks of work away from the actual games in the Championship and see something slightly different off the back of the international break, because there's a lot of things that are leaving a lot of people with the heads being scratched. Most, I mean, the manager at the most, because as you said, he's purported to have played this certain way, and that's what has been his major kind of his USP coming into Hull City, but no one's seen it as yet. The fact that the statement about we'll just outscore the opposition is an admirable one, an exciting one, but in practice is completely incorrect, because City haven't got anyone at this moment in time that you look like is going to knock on the door of double figures for goals going forward, are they, at all? And then going back to Fletcher's point about them putting the balls into the box, it's about having the right players putting those balls into the box with the right quality and the people to get on the end of those particular crosses, which again, thus far, hasn't really been seen consistently enough for a side to be at least in the top half, if not trying to knock on the door of the top six. So there's too many unknowables at the moment because of how the team's been set up and what the context of what City deem themselves to be. Because at this moment in time, I just think it just looks like a very confused team.
Yeah, but I mean that's part of the point. It doesn't look as though he'll change his philosophy. He doesn't look flexible in what he does. I'm still baffled by it. Really, I don't think he plays through midfield.
That's the thing, Burnsy, with this, because you're either kind of committed to your philosophy or you're stubborn in the face of all available evidence to suggest that you need to change. So we commend some managers for sticking to the guns. We pillory other ones for not changing. And yeah, like you say, if it's a mixture of both, it's slightly worrying in the sense that if it doesn't come good, then it really won't come good, and it'll be, like I said, a struggle of a season for City, and a lack of identity, which will get the majority of the people sat inside the MKM either scratching their heads or terribly frustrated.
Let me read a couple of messages and then I'm going to ask the pair of you a question. Yananis from Hull says the club needs to wake up and realise we're in a relegation battle now if things continue. This is no longer the time to be talking about football philosophies and the long term. We need every player at action stations, all hands on deck, and a new manager that will get results. Danny McDonald says, how bad must we be to be struggling in this season's Championship, given the average quality of the league this season? We can complain about the transfer window all we want, but the system stifles our talent in central areas. And Phil says, if he's not gone this week, then he's here all season. Ideal time to get rid and 2 weeks to work on things with someone new. He can't keep saying we played well when we're losing. And Chris King says, I just watched Baz Cooper's YouTube post-match. Is there a warning triangle on that? On the sacking Tim Walter point, a theme of don't sack a manager before you have someone lined up. Who should the club try and line up? Look, I'm going to ask the pair of you a question. Is there any reason why you wouldn't go for Mark Robins now?
There's absolutely no reason at all, other than the fact that whether Mark wanted a bit of time out after doing 7 years at Coventry, or, to be quite frank, he had a better offer.
Yeah.
You would absolutely, and I hate talking about people losing their jobs, and I know how precarious being a manager is, but if there was a realistic opportunity to get Matt Robins, you would be idiotic to pass that up.
I agree. I think
Robins
did a phenomenal job at Coventry, 7.5 years, and all the nonsense that he had to deal with at that football club during that time. He kept his dignity, he kept the fans, he kept building the team, and he was a penalty kick away from being in the Premier League. So and also got obviously that incredible FA Cup run last year. But I think I echo Prutts' comments on Robins. I would think that given what he went through at Coventry, 7.5 years is a long time, particularly with what he had to deal with. He probably wants a rest, I would think, and who could blame him for that? So I think that probably rules that one out. And I just don't think, I don't feel that if there was a vacancy at Hull City, and we have to be mindful that there's still a guy in a job, that if there was a vacancy, I'm not sure that Mark Robins would be suited, would fancy it personally. I think Rob Edwards at Luton, that looks like, judging by their form and his post-match interviews after that hammering at Middlesbrough, that has a feeling that relationship may well be coming to an end. So I think Rob Edwards is a manager that I think a lot of clubs will be looking at. Obviously, he's got a promotion to the Premier League on his CV, and he's well respected, well liked, still fairly young. There's obviously Stephen Schumacher, did a really, really good job at Plymouth before moving to Stoke. Didn't quite work out with Stoke, but I know, Prutts, you're aware of that situation. He's on the market. He's a manager that he's obviously worked with Jared Dublin before when they were together at Stoke City. So there's another manager there. But
Ryan Lowe, Gary Rowett. There's a lot. There's a lot of, and going back to that question early on about manager availability, and if you're trying to mitigate what the financial impact would be, ideally, obviously, if you're moving a manager on, which involves either gardening leave or severance payment, and sometimes it's done over the course of a contract, or it's done in a lump sum. It's more over the course of a contract nowadays rather than a lump sum. You don't want that to be compounded by having to pay compensation to get somebody out somewhere else. And again, once again, unless, say, you're looking at someone like a Matt Bloomfield at Wickham, who's absolutely flying, who a lot of people are interested in, there wouldn't be many managers that, with the greatest respect, you would be buying out of a contract to come to City. Not in the Championship, absolutely not in the Championship. Like I said, maybe the top end of League One.
Sellers at Reading would be top of my list, but
do you reckon?
I think he's done a great job at Reading.
Yeah.
Really difficult scenario. Good experience of bringing through young players at a completely chaotic football club. So
go back to ownership. That's possibly the other end of the spectrum of the example that I wanted to use, which was, we spoke about Ajun and being visible and vocal. Ruben's just been left on his own, completely left on his own. No idea what's coming around the corner, who's saying what, who's doing what. And as you say, Baz, absolutely doing a cracking job in the face of insane kind of complete quiet from above. So yeah, that's the thing with this. There's a lot of managers, and maybe there's a lot of these managers that I know quite well personally, the likes of Steve Schumacher and Ryan Lowe and Gary Rowett, people like that. There are similarities between all of them, yet they've all got their own little idiosyncrasies. And you look at changes that have been made. So the Preston change, of course, Ryan coming out, and you've got Paul Heckingbottom going in, and there was a bit of a jump, and now it's and then it evened out and dipped a little bit. They lose to Portsmouth. It's a change sometimes isn't the absolute be all and end all, and the kind of the magic broom that sweeps it all to one side and helps you start again. So out of all of them, and again, I know a lot of them and respect all of them for taking that leap and giving management a go, because Christ almighty, it's not straightforward. If you could get Robins, then that would be the one that you'd lean on and all that, I think.
Schumacher is an interesting one, isn't it? Because obviously he's out of work. He's worked with Jared Dublin before. What do you think about Stephen Schumacher, Prutts?
I think it'd be good. I think the relationship between the two of them possibly painted as in a sense of they did work together for a while and then one moved on from a football club. I think that was more to do with ownership rather than actually Stephen Schumacher's take on what his abilities were. The thing that, if you look at Stoke City and their recruitment over quite a long period of time, it's not been stellar. They've got a lot of players. They've had a lot of players. They've had squads that have been big and full of several different managers' recruits, and it hasn't gelled. For a team that dropped out of the Premier League and has got nowhere near the playoffs, that shows collectively where they've fallen short as a football club. So I don't think. I mean, it would make sense to make sure that relationship was one that could be workable. Don't have to be best mates, just have to give me the players that I need and or the type of player that I need to make sure that we get the best out of ourselves. So I don't see that as if it was, obviously speaking hypothetically, if it was a Steven Schumacher, I don't think for 1 second it would be a big enough stumbling block for them, for a manager to turn down. Because as well in this, and again, knowing managers like I do, there is only that finite amount of jobs in the Championship, and the Championship is a very, very attractive place to go and ply your trade. And there's a knowingness that that these jobs, there's a finite amount of jobs. So Hull City is absolutely an attractive proposition in the Championship, absolutely. And whoever gets it right is going to really put both the city and themselves back in the kind of footballing map. But it's a hell of a job on. It is a hell of a job on.
Go on, Burnsy, just before we finish.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we have to wait and see whether there's any movement on the manager's position. The owner's perfectly within his right to say no, we're sticking with it. But personally, I'd like to see the owner come out and say why and tell us why. I'll just give you this one final one from to the 1904 club from Chris Mills, who says, thinking back to when Adjan took over, the squad is actually much better now, but we're in the same league position with better players available. Barring the injuries, the results and performances come down to the way the manager wants them to play. The tactics philosophy is the fault. I'd have to go back through the squad of when he took over and see whether I would agree with Chris there, but thank you for all your messages.
Absolutely. That's it for today's episode of the 1904 Club. Just one final point to wish Liam Miller well. He goes under the knife on his ACL knee injury on Tuesday morning. We don't know yet when Mohamed Baloumi will be having his surgery. So that's one to keep an eye on over the next couple of weeks. But as I say, best wishes to Liam Miller on hope it all goes well and recovery. I saw him at the training ground on Thursday and had a chat with him. Seemed in good spirits. I know he was at the stadium on Sunday as well. So we wish him well. Burnsy, thank you for your time today. And Prutts from a coffee shop car park in the middle of West Yorkshire.
It's been quite nice, actually. It's been some flash cars around here, you know. It's not mine, Christ. It's I mean, they're driving very fast, so maybe a suggestion that the person driving them isn't the owner. But anyway, that's me casting aspersions on whoever's driving these cars. But no, it's been a pleasure. Nice bit of sunshine, a bit of wind. Is it winter? Autumnal sun, that's what I'll say.
I don't know what it is. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for getting in touch. As always, keep your comments coming to @the 1904 Club, and we will be back again soon.